Hey guys, this is Daniel Mac Sweeney from Financial Freedom Forever, and today I have a guest on, Mikkel Thorup from the Expat Money Show, and in this podcast, it's not a podcast, it's a Facebook Live. In this Facebook Live, we're going to be talking about how Mikkel started his podcast and what his goals are for the future with this podcast. So, hi Mikkel, how are you doing?
It's great. I'm doing awesome, thank you. My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me, Daniel. It's really a pleasure.
Fantastic. So we had a bit of issue there with the camera. My computer kept cutting out. My camera wasn't working. So thanks be to God, we actually finally got on live together, because last time we had an awful trouble as well trying to get on live because of technical difficulties on my side again. So it's good to have you finally on the show. And
it's always the fun of technology. You know, you want it to do one thing and then it has a mind of its own, decides it wants to do something completely different.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, Mikkel, I'd love to hear a bit, and I'd say the audience would love to hear a bit about yourself and who you were, where you began. So if you would like to start off with how you started your journey to create your podcast.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We can talk about my journey to start the podcast, or we can go a little bit further back in time and kind of tell you my story about how I got into traveling, which kind of leads into the podcast. So it depends if you want a really short version or if you want a slightly longer version.
Oh, well, Mikkel, I have all day. So if you want to keep talking, no problem.
Okay, well, so let's go through the slightly longer version. And it's going to sound right at the beginning. At the beginning, it's going to sound like it's a really long story, but I promise it won't be. And it definitely has a point. So when I was a child, I was diagnosed with a learning disability. So basically, I was told when I was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years old, something doesn't work right in your brain, or something works differently in your brain. So what they did was they actually took me out of my normal school, my home school, and they sent me across town. And it was really challenging because they told me it was going to be a special school, but it really wasn't a special school at all. It was actually a special classroom in a completely regular school. So what ended up happening was I used to get in a lot of fights. I used to get into fist fights like almost every day at school. And I had my nose broken 3 times, and I was in the hospital, and I had my teeth put through my lip and my teeth knocked out. And I had a really, really terrible fucking time with education growing up. So I ended up going to this special school for 3 years. And like I said, always fights, always problems. And then when I was gotten to grade 7, they actually took me and they brought me back to my home school, my neighborhood school, you could say. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. You know, I'm going to see all my old friends and I'm going to have so much fun and everything's going to go back to the way it should be. But you know how it is, you know, kids, they get a little bit mean and they haven't seen you for a while. And everyone starts to talk. And I was like, oh, where did he go? You know, like, I kind of remember him. I remember him from a few years ago, but what happened to him? Oh, he went to some retard school. They had to ship him off. There's something wrong with him. So, of course, what happens? Fight. Heaps of problems. By 12 years old, I start failing out of school. By 15 years old, I'm done. I walk out. Never went back. So I had big troubles with this false belief pattern, you could say, that I was stupid, that there was something wrong with me, that there was a problem with me, you know? And I turned to drugs and alcohol and a lot of things like this that really messed me up for a few years. And some of this stuff is a little bit hard to talk about, but I want to share this because I do think that it has a point to it, you know? Mm-hmm. So I went from feeling my whole life like I didn't actually belong where I was and there was something wrong with me. And when I did my first trip overseas, when I started traveling, when I became an expat, it was like everything changed for me. My whole life, it was like everything opened up and I met like my people, you could say, you know? And I started traveling as a teenager and I went overseas. I went to Ireland. Actually, I think my first country I ever went to, besides Canada and the United States, was Ireland. So definitely a shout out to you, Daniel. And I went over to England and Wales, and then a couple months later, I went back and I went over to Spain and Portugal and all over Europe, and I went to North Africa, and I was there for a couple of months and started hitchhiking, and I started doing all this crazy stuff. And since then, I've now lived overseas as an expat for roughly 20 years and visited almost 100 countries. And a lot of that time, I've been an entrepreneur. And I just want people to understand that, like, things were not easy for me. Things are still not easy for me. I've had to overcome a massive amount of challenges. And these entrepreneurs and these people who go out there and tell you that you can have financial freedom and it's so easy, and look what I'm doing, 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, and they paint this picture of themselves how everything is shiny and they're so perfect and they're so amazing. And I want to call like complete bullshit. Like that's fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
If you are doing well in this, you slugged it out and you worked your ass off, or you're lying, because this stuff is hard. Entrepreneurship is hard. There's no question about it. And I want people to understand, like, I came from the worst place available. Like, people say, oh, I'm a college dropout. Mate, I didn't even finish high school. I started failing out of school at 12. I went on and I educated myself. Now I read 100, 120, 130 books a year, all on personal development, all on business, all on entrepreneurship. But that's me. That's my own hunger. That's my own drive. Try having a form of dyslexia and trying to read 120 books a year.
Incredible. Like they say, it's the hardest thing to do is to self-educate yourself. But when you do, it's much more. What am I trying to say? It's much more beneficial for you, and you don't actually fit into the pack, if you know what I'm saying. You're actually
absolutely
become an outcast, but in the same sense you don't, because there's another community out there like yourself who is following the same path as you, but in all different types of ways.
Absolutely. And that's one of the most amazing things about the internet, is even if, like, in my whole hometown of 350,000 people, there was no one there like me. When I started meeting people traveling overseas, I was able to connect with them and stay in touch with them on the internet. And then you form your tribe, as they say.
Yeah.
And those are the type of people that I spend time with. I choose to spend time with entrepreneurs, and I choose to spend time with people who are often doing it, location independent, digital nomads, whatever name you want to use. I'm an expat. I live in the Middle East right now. I've been over here in the Middle East for 7 years. And everybody that I know is all from a different country. I don't know any other Canadians here. I think I know one American. Otherwise, my friends are from Asia, from China, Japan, Korea. I got Australians, I got Serbians, Romanians, people from all over the planet. And we all came together in one place because we all have this same belief pattern in the same way that we decide that we want to style our lives. And and I want people to understand that, like, just because you're born in one place or one country, and just because you grew up in one hometown, it doesn't actually mean that you need to spend your whole life there. It doesn't mean that you need to invest there. It doesn't mean you need to buy a house there. Actually, you don't owe anything to anybody. You can pick up your life and you can move overseas and you can create the life that you want. I have my wife and I have my daughter here with me. I even have my mother here with me. I brought her over to the Middle East because it's such a beautiful, safe, amazing, incredible place, So I really chose my life, and I wasn't set in that circumstance of being, a high school dropout with a learning disability and all these problems and fights and drug addict. And, I left all of that shit behind 20 years ago. And I really spent my life creating something and building something that I want, that I think has value. So does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And do you know when you actually started traveling, right? You were traveling around the world and you were working part-time jobs here and there, and you were seeing different places. But what finally clicked in your head that you actually had to start doing something else to start achieving what you're achieving right now, is with your podcast and your entrepreneur goals? What actually started that off? What actually?
Well, that's a great question. Basically, I had a dream of a job that I wanted to do, and I got into that in my teenage years. And what I thought the job was going to be and what the job turned out to be were remarkably different things. And I don't know if you've had this feeling before or any of the listeners have as well, but you go into one type of career expecting one thing and it ends up being completely different. Now, whether that's the media or that's, television, or maybe you just were not informed or I was not informed, but the job that I got into was not what I wanted. So I was looking almost straight off the bat at doing something on the side. But like I said before, this was 20 years ago when I left. So although we did have the internet, it certainly wasn't like it is today. It was dial up, and once in a blue moon you would find a what do we call them, internet cafes, and you'd be paying by the minute. And when you're half starved hitchhiking backpacker through Central America or something like that, maybe you're going on the internet once a week. So I didn't really find out about this type of entrepreneurship till much later. And but that drive and that seed that was in my head to be able to provide for myself and create things on my own term, that's been there for a long, 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 long time.
Do you know, Mikkel, that's very interesting what you just said there. That like you were living and you were having the experience. You were actually seeing different things. You were, putting the feelings and the knowledge into your head as well of different things. And this finally led to what you're doing now, your entrepreneurship on your podcast. Even if you were only going on a computer once a week, you were still traveling and seeing different things and meeting new people and learning from them. And, you learn different skills from all these people and from seeing all these things. And it's just amazing because it's the same with a lot of other entrepreneurs out there that they go out there and they experience things and then they create what they've experienced and they make it better for other people.
Absolutely.
They create something for their experience.
And that's really what the whole podcast is about. So I host a podcast. It's called the Expat Money Show. Basically what it is I interview entrepreneurs from all over the world, from literally all walks of life. I have so many different people from different countries, I can't even count them all. And we break down these things, so continual education is always a big part. This failing moment, this difficulties, these challenges that people have had, I really try to incorporate that into the show. And then it's always that location independent. So we talk a little bit about the travels and the challenges they've had in different countries, and often how they've built their business online so that they could have that type of freedom that we were just speaking about,
Yeah.
But to go back to your previous point, absolutely. When you travel really extensively, it gives you these like skills, or like I like to think of it as perspective. So I have a very different perspective than a lot of people, because when you visit, 100 countries, and I don't mean like I was in one day in each country. I mean, like I was in 2 months in Colombia, I was 2 months in Morocco, I was 5 months in Guatemala, 7 years in the UAE, I was 3 years in Australia, a year in New Zealand, a year in Singapore, and a year in the Arctic. So like these places that I've been to, I spent extended amount of time. And a lot of the times, I would be friends with the local people, and they do, ordinary things every single day, completely different than you would ever do in your home country. So that gives you this slight shift, just 2 or 3 degrees each time to be able to look at things from a different perspective. And I think that that's something that, expats and travelers that we have, that if you only spend your entire life in one place, you think that you're right. This is the right way to do it. So Canadians think that Canadian way of doing something is correct, and the rest of the world does it some other way. It's weird. We don't understand it. We don't want to understand it. It's very strange. But when you visit Oman and Yemen and all these places, like you see that that's not really the case. There's actually many different ways of seeing things, different ways of perceiving the world. So when you go to create a business and build something, you can look at it from your customers' eyes, who are going to be buying it from all around the world, not just from that one place. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Like what you were saying there, it's very interesting, that people see their own point of view is what they see is what they've been brought up with, and where the rest of their community is going. And like yourself, you're the expat that has traveled to many places, you can see what can be improved and what can't be improved, and what the issue is, what your problem solver. You can see the problems to solve. So I mean, with that knowledge of traveling like that, you can come up with so many different types of business ideas. Why did you create the podcast? Is that the reason? Because you reckoned that you could bring people on to actually educate other people on the problems that what I'm trying to say, in the different countries.
Absolutely.
To solve issues.
So I started the podcast for many reasons, and I'm happy to go through all of them with you. Number one, it is a business card. You have to understand that everybody needs to have a business card. Like you just wrote your first book, Daniel. I'm writing my first book as well. That's a business card. That is credibility. That is authority. So if you just go to, I've had guys on the show that are worth, I don't know, I had one guy on the show, he was worth $40 million. Wow. I met him at a conference. He was the keynote speaker with, 2,000 people there or something like that. I bought his book, got a signature, ended up, introducing myself and told him, listen, I have this podcast. I loved your message. I loved watching you on stage. I would love to interview for my show. Everyone else, he's just signs the book, passes it back, signs the book, passes it back, signs the book, passes it back. Me, I got an hour with him. And in that hour, I got to ask every single question I wanted to ask. Yeah. So although I am all about helping people, I'm also doing this because I'm scratching my own itch. I have these questions and I have these things that I'm searching answers for, So who better to go to than, some guy who's already done it, who's 10 years or 15 years ahead of me. Yeah. So when you have something like a podcast, because listen, the barrier to entry on a podcast is a lot higher than it is just to do, I don't know, a blog or just do a YouTube channel. Like a podcast is actually, it's quite a bit of work to set up. And once you get established and you have, a certain amount of listeners, that's credibility. That's a business card. Same with the book, same with speaking on stage. Any of these things that you can do in your life to set you up, it adds authority to your message. So people will actually listen to you. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I'll just add something else there. It's also evergreen, so it's always there. So yes. 10 years down the line, people can always come back and start at the start.
Absolutely.
Of your podcast.
With podcasts, when I find a new person that I like to listen to, I go back to like episode 1. Like I'll listen to like the 3 or 4 newest ones, then I'll listen to the first dozen. So like you'll still get views over and over and over again. Like I have a Facebook page, I do Facebook Lives as well. But the life cycle for that is like a couple of days. After a couple of days, the videos stop getting watched, especially if you stop driving traffic to it. But a podcast or, a YouTube video with long tail search keywords, those are like assets. That's like real estate. You build that and you'll keep getting traffic for that for years to come.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true.
So this is one of the reasons you could say is why I've created a podcast, why I picked this medium. Like I also picked it because I like to talk, like I don't know if you guys can tell or not, but I enjoy talking, I really enjoy speaking. So I wanted to be able to speak to these amazing entrepreneurs from around the world, and I needed a way to get my foot in the door. So I'm able to take their knowledge and I'm able to pair it with all the things I've learned as an entrepreneur, all the things I've learned as being an expat for 20 years, all the things I've learned by reading hundreds and hundreds of books and spending tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on training courses, and then package all that together and put it together in one product. In 1 hour, you get this new perspective, like I was just speaking about, that I hope is opening people's eyes and making them realize things from a different point of view. And if I can do that, then I feel like I've been successful.
Yeah. Like, do you know the way that when some people start, it's easier to delegate jobs, or well, not easier, but you can become more successful delegating jobs to other people. You are doing a podcast. You're a solopreneur, basically. But do you actually do everything yourself in-house, or do you actually delegate jobs, hire different people like in the likes of Fiverr or Upwork and so on?
So we are a small team. I have an executive producer in the United States. He does all the editing for my show, so it's super, 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 super professional because I'm massively respectful of people's time. So when my listener tunes in, I don't want them to hear me go, or if I lose my train of thought or something like that. I want all of that cut out. So when you listen to the 60 minutes, that is 60 minutes just jam-packed with information. So I've got my producer. I have a VA because otherwise I would never make it to half my meetings. Basically every day I'm online doing 4 or 5 different interviews. Either I'm interviewing other people, people are interviewing me. I have meetings, I have investors, different things for personal stuff. So I have a VA, and sometimes I play with a little bit of SEO. I try to get some people to do some SEO. I hire them off for a couple months. Nothing happens. I get pissed off. I fire them, and then I find someone else. SEO, it's just like black magic. I don't understand this stuff. That's why I like so many of your articles, Daniel. You've been able to help me understand a little bit better. So I definitely appreciate that.
Well, I'm not a professional SEO person, but I only worked for an SEO company for 2 months, 3 months, but I picked up a lot of stuff and information from the actual owner of that business over in Australia, and he actually showed me really cool techniques and really interesting stuff. And when I was there, and I did, we were doing SEO for an electrician in Melbourne, and
I lived in Melbourne for 3 years.
Lovely place. Actually,
amazing
my
place,
brother and sister are living there now at the moment.
Oh, I love it.
But so I was doing I was actually doing the cold calls, and I was organizing meetings. But he decided one day, come on over here, he said, and he showed me how to do SEO. And it was just, I was only doing it for a couple of weeks, but very interesting stuff. A lot of keywords, But I think that was just before Google changed its algorithm, and we were using keywords. And I got the page to actually Google page 1 for electrician in Melbourne, which is very interesting. But it's very, very confusing. It's really weird.
And you know what? For the internet, for trying to do entrepreneurship online, there are literally like 10 million different things that you could learn. But for me, I'd rather double down on a couple of key skills. So for me, I want to be a good interviewer. So I literally take courses on how to interview people and spend money on how to watch courses on how to interview people. I read books. I watch other people's interviews and then take notes on the type of questions they ask, how they phrase things. And I put a lot of time and effort into that. And I can even see from my beginning episodes to the ones that I'm producing right now, the quality that educating myself has been. So that's something for me that I find is very important. So I'm really doubling down on that skill. For SEO, I think it's such a massive field, and there are so many amazing professionals out there to do it. I'd rather pay someone else who specializes in that. But I do want to understand at least the basics. So when I do hire these people, I know if they are doing what they're supposed to do, or if they're just taking my money and laughing.
Yeah.
So.
I doubt they do that. If you find the right people, you're well sorted. But you're doing the right things anyway for a person who is a successful person, because you're actually delegating jobs. You're actually you're focusing on the thing that you're good at, which is podcasting and talking to people. And getting information that you're getting information from your interviewees, which is what you're good at, and you're actually using other people then to do the jobs that you actually don't know, which is much better for when people want to succeed and stuff, because it gives you more time to focus on what you're good at. And as we can see, you're pretty good at what you do.
No one is getting paid big bucks to be a jack of all trades. You have to understand that. Understand a small bit from each of the jobs so that you can hire appropriately, but then take that 1, 2, maybe 3 things and just become the biggest expert in that field and niche down as much as possible. Like, I do podcasting, but I don't just do podcasting. I do entrepreneurship podcasting, but I don't do just entrepreneur podcasting. I do entrepreneurship podcasting for expats who live overseas. I try to really go in, and that entrepreneurship is for businesses that are done online. And probably in another 6 months, I'll niche down even a little bit further. So if this is you, when you hear this podcast, it speaks directly to you. You know, you feel like boom, boom, boom. I'm talking exactly to you. You know, and if I'm not talking to you, that's all right, because there's 1,000 other shows out there. You know, you don't need to listen to mine. I want the people who listen to my show to really resonate with me, to understand, you know, this location independence, to building a business online so you can have life on your own terms. And, you know, and we do things differently as an expat, opposed to those who are, you know, what do you guys like to call yourselves? Digital nomads, you know, living on a beach and laptop lifestyle. That's cool and all, but that's not me. I'm 7 years in one country right now, you know, 7 years in the Middle East. And, you know, I'm ingrained in the culture here. I'm ingrained with the people. I study the language and the food and everything like that. So I feel at home here. And then I use this as a base. And then from the base, I travel out to all the neighboring countries over and over and over again, you know?
Yeah. So, Mikkel, you know, you're a massive expat. How many countries have you been to already this year? And it's only April.
You know what? This year, I'm doing something a little bit different. So this year, I'm spending a lot of time in the United States because I'm really going all in on seminars. So I'm building out my personal network, my brand network. I went to Tony Robbins' UPW. I spent big money and got the best seats on the house, something like $6,000 for my tickets to be able to be, you know, 4 or 5 feet away from Tony Robbins. 4-day event for that. I went to Funnel Hacking Live in Orlando. Tomorrow I fly out for Super Conference, which is another big marketing conference, also in Orlando. I go in like 24 hours. I was in Chicago for a high-end mastermind that I paid $15,000 to be a part of. And it's also marketing. I spend a lot of time on marketing. It's so fundamentally important for any type of business whatsoever. And I'll go to Chicago a couple more times this year. I think besides that, we're going to China in May for 2 weeks. I'll go to Turkey. I'll take my wife to Turkey for a week. And then, I don't know. My friend's got a house in Greece that he wants me to go check in on, so I might go and see that. Otherwise, everything else is all for work. You know, I was in London this week, in the UK for work, and then, I don't know, all over the place. This is like so kind of a random, weird answer to a probably a pretty straightforward question, but I don't
know. We probably know already where your most favorite place is. Abu Dhabi. Would that be right?
Yeah. Abu Dhabi is a nice place to live. It's interesting for a tourist, but my countries that are like famous, like Abu Dhabi is my favorite place to live because I've lived in 7 different countries and I like this one the best. But for traveling, just to go and see something interesting, it wouldn't be Abu Dhabi. It wouldn't be the UAE. I spent time in Iran in like 2012 in Persia, and that was like unbelievable. Super, 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 super beautiful country. Amazing people. Natural beauty. They have everything. They've got mountains, they've got deserts, they've got the ocean, they've got lakes, and they got like everything. The Persian Gulf, it's
amazing.
It's unbelievable. Like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years of history there. I spent 2 weeks by myself there. Actually, I hired a guide, so he helped take me around. We drove around for 2 weeks, and I would definitely recommend that to people.
So it's amazing, you know, some people's perception of some places that they've never been or don't really hear about. They only hear about the bad things. But like what you just said about Iran, you know, you just told us the good things about it. And that's incredible because you don't hear that much from certain places.
Well, even you know what the problem is that a lot of people who are saying negative things have never been there. So what I like to do is I listen to the media, I listen to what people say, and if they say it's terrible and it's bad, then I go and see for myself, and then I form my own opinions because I don't rely on Fox News to give me information, and I don't trust them. I don't trust mainstream media. I trust independent media. That's why I do podcasting. That's why I listen to podcasts or blogs or things like this. I'm a lot more prone to trust something like that. But nothing will ever replace going and experiencing things for yourself. So I've been to Colombia. I spent 2 months in Colombia when I was 22 years old. You know, it's supposed to be top 10 most dangerous country in the world. I had an amazing experience there. I had so much fun. I met so many amazing people. Like, I remember one time I asked one gentleman, I was a little bit lost. I asked one gentleman which bus to get on so I could go back to, it's called La Candelaria, as a district, an area in Bogota, in the capital.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of him just saying, okay, you know, jump on 22 and the rest are like, go straight on number 22, he actually got on the bus, took me there, and took me out for coffee, took me out for lunch, and then walked me to my hostel, and then got on the bus and went home. You know, he just like took 2 hours out of his day to make sure that I got safe, and then actually bought me lunch and bought me coffee. I was like, wow, that would never happen in Canada. Like, that was just like, it was so heartfelt, you know. And it's supposed to be the most dangerous country in the world, or one of the most dangerous. You know, like I don't know. Doesn't make sense to
You
me.
know, people are, well, that used to happen a lot here in Ireland as well. People, and it still does in some places, but we're losing it. You know, with the help that you get from the locals, we'll say. People are like frightened of each other now. They're kind of nervous about, you know, where you're coming from or who you are, because of all these because of mainstream media. I think, like, for example, here in Ireland, I used to go tumming when I was like 8, 9, 10 years of age, tumming, you know, for cars to give me a lift into town.
Yep.
And nowadays, it wouldn't be heard of. No kid should be on the road tumming. It's ridiculous. And you could trust the drivers. You could trust people. But nowadays, people are unsure. They're scared that they'll be accused or blamed, or the person is bad.
It's liability. You know what? I can tell you firsthand experience that in a general, people are good. Doesn't matter what country you come from, people are inherently good, and they want to help, and they protect people, and they protect children and women, and people are not out there to get you. You know, like, I went to North Korea in 2014, and you know, it has this terrible, terrible, terrible reputation. And I understand that the government does some wacky things, and you know, it's a little bit different. This is why I went there in the first place. But you know what I did when I got to North Korea? We went out drinking. We went bowling like multiple times, like almost every night we were out bowling. We went to the circus. We went to the fair. We rode the subway. We went dancing. It was National Day, so they had these big outdoor parks that were just filled with people having picnics. We sat down with people and ate with the local people and just talked, and you know, like, it was normal people having a normal life. Like, it wasn't as bad as people say. It wasn't, I don't know, it was so different what the media said. Like, yes, the country is like going back in time, because you know, they haven't had an influx of goods, and they don't have open trade routes with a lot of the countries, and they don't have open internet. They have internet, but it's only centralized to North Korea. But the people, their mentality, their heart, everything like that, they're still very hospitable. They're still good people. They still want to protect you. There's nothing bad's going to happen to you there. You know, don't do something stupid. I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't try to sneak into government facilities or take pictures of the military. You know, like use your brain and everything will be okay.
Yeah. It's the same when you go to other countries. You have to follow the rules. You know, it's the same like where you're living right now. You know, there's a lot of rules there that you've got to be aware of for a tourist or even for an expat just to move there. You've got to be aware of all these rules and regulations that what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And it's the same everywhere else. You just got to understand what the rules are. Be aware. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there, because we have the mindset of learning and educating ourselves all the time, that we're open-minded, and we see that we have to know these things because we have to know these things. You know, that's the answer there.
No, you're 100% right.
Yeah. So let's go back to I want to ask you as well, because you're an investor, Mikkel. So what do you think are the best investments out there at the moment? You know, like crypto, shares, property, stock, you know, bonds.
Okay, so let's take one step back. So You have different types of investors. Some type of investors, they think that they like, okay, how to put this. So with my education, like I said, I like to know a little bit about everything, but I like to focus on one thing. With my investments, I kind of like to do the opposite. I like to be all like really diversified, but I look at diversification very different than a lot of people. So with diversification in, say, the United States, or any major financial market, basically what you'd be looking at is you'd have some oil and gas stocks, you'd have some precious metals, so gold and silver. You might have some tech companies in there. You might have an index tracking fund, the S&P 500 or the Russell 2000 or the Dow Jones Industrial, or any of these ones, where you might have an ETF that tracks this. Okay, so that's great for some people. That's diversified. If you have if you have spiders, if you have an ETF that tracks the S&P 500, then you're pretty diversified. For me, those are still correlated assets. So for me, I don't find that very diversified. So what I do is I diversify not just through asset class in that aspect, but I also diversify through time. So I have different investments that are becoming mature at different points in time. So I have bonds. I used to do a lot of option trading. I would make sure all the options, my calls and puts and strangles and all these strategies are all spread out through different parts of time. I also diversify through currency because, the American dollar might be doing really well at the moment. Well, it's starting to come down a little bit, but, I bought into Brexit. I bought into the GBP straight after Brexit, and just in the last, say, 18 months, it's up 20% from what the bottom was, so the investment itself made money. Then the play on currency also made money, I really like bonds. So, I have my coupons for my bonds coming out, expiring at different times in the future. I make sure I'm invested in different countries, in different regions. So I have, like I said, stuff in the UK. I have stuff in Canada and the States. I own real estate. I own real estate in China. We've got a bunch of apartments over there. And I like to have things very spread out because the worldwide markets are so massive. For you to understand them is extraordinarily difficult. Like even the professionals, most of them get it wrong more times than they get it right. So I try to put in my own experience through traveling, things that make sense with me, but I try to hedge all of my bets. So I will look at it and go, okay, I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in cryptocurrency. For me, cryptocurrency is amazing. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It makes perfect sense. But I could be completely wrong, and if I'm completely wrong, that's all right, because I've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in bonds in the UK, which are ultra conservative, So it's like I hedge all of these, and I'm ultra diversified through all of these different things. And for me, that system, that strategy works a lot better because I make a lot of mistakes, and I don't want to go all in. Like I could put all of my eggs in one basket, Like look at all the guys who bought into cryptocurrency January 1st, and 3 months later, it's lost 75% of its value,
Yeah, very funny. Well, funny to like the smart people.
Yeah, like that's a kick in the balls, man, Like, I put a lot of money in, but if it all went to zero, it's all right. It's not going to change my life. If you put my whole life savings in there, man, that's a different story. That's 20 years of work that I've put together. So then I might
willing, but you're only willing. You're only happy to lose what you to accept. So the likes of the crypto there, you've got to be aware that things are just going to go up and down. At any stage, any time, and it's happening all again now at the moment. It's on the rise, but it will collapse again.
Absolutely.
It's a cycle. Everything's a cycle.
Yeah.
So
it's just that the cycles of cryptocurrency happen like really fast. Usually we're used to maybe 7 years in, say, an equity market, and with cryptocurrency it's like 7 months or something like that, or 3 months. So it happens really fast. So like I said, I did option trading for 7 years. So I'm really used to like ultra volatile products and how they behave. And it's not even so much how they behave, it's how I behave in relation to them. So with people in cryptocurrency is if they don't have this type of a background, they might not understand their own emotions, and they'll get totally freaked out, and they'll get panicked, or they'll get super excited when it goes up, and they'll put in more than they're able to lose. I know myself well enough because I already lost a fuckload of money doing other stupid things. So now with cryptocurrency, I know how to govern this type of behavior. So it's that self-awareness that you really have to be aware of. Like, investing, just like entrepreneurship, is hard. If you don't trust yourself, or you're not willing to lose like a couple $100,000 just to even start breaking even, then you ought to just get into the really basic stuff, buy and hold strategy, dividend strategies, but forget about any of the advanced products. Forget about day trading. Forget about futures markets, or commodities, or options, or anything like that.
Yeah. That's good. So, Mikkel, you read a lot, like you said earlier. Can you name like your top 5 books for us, and why, or even your top 3, even, because they might be super interesting, and you might get into a lot of detail with them. Or do you have them there?
I'm like literally looking around. Like, I have stacks of books everywhere. My house is like it's been taken over by books. My family laughs at me.
You said you set the limit last year to read 100 books. Did you reach that 100 books?
Yeah, I did 117 last year. I keep track of them all. Like, I write every single book down that I read, and then I try to take notes from every book as well. I will preface this saying that I do listen to I'd say about a third of my books through Audible. I like audiobooks as well because I try to maximize my time whenever I'm on transport or on airplanes or anything. So I do balance it between audiobooks and physical books. So some people count this, some people don't count this. For me, I definitely count it. It's still time learning. As for favorite books, I'm a big Malcolm Gladwell fan. I've read all of his books. I think he is just such a genius. His perspective and his way of looking at things is so radically different than anyone else that I've come across. And his style of writing is so articulate. And he takes these big concepts and he proves them with smaller stories that are easily digestible. And I just think that he is just amazing.
Yeah.
So I loved Outliers. I thought it was one of the greatest books ever. I've read it only once. You know what? I think I'm going to read it again this week because it's so good. But I've read Blink and What the Dog Saw, and Malcolm, or David and Goliath, and all of his ones. So Malcolm Gladwell is amazing.
What would he write in, Mikkel, for the people that don't know who Malcolm is? What would be his niche? What would be his preference?
Okay, so he takes a solitary an idea, and he explains this one idea by using 10 or 20 different stories it's all real life, based off people's experiences. So, for example, Outliers is written about a time that either a time of year or a year that you were born in that you were predisposed to do one thing extraordinarily well. So, for example, Steve Wozniak and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, all these guys were all born within several months of each other. And it turns out that basically that was the perfect year to be born, because when personal computers and microchips were being developed, they were out of college, but they weren't old enough that they had a family to support. So they were able to take extended amount of time and focus just in on this. So they were working, 16 or 18 hours a day coding and building, the personal computer revolution at that time. If they had been born, say, 2 or 3 years earlier, they would have still been in high school. Maybe they would have been too young. If it was 3 or 4 years later, then maybe they were too old. They would have been married and had children, and they would have these types of responsibilities that wouldn't have allowed them to do that same amount of time. And really, if we didn't have those people born at that time, we would have had someone else that would have came up at that time. Does that make sense?
Makes
So that's just one
real sense.
example of the style that he writes in. So he's trying to prove that this concept of being born in a certain year or month or week or day or whatever has a predisposition to a certain skill or asset or ability. And he does it with hockey, and he does it with different sports, and he does it with electronics, and he does it with architecture, and he does it with all these different things, all to prove this one point. But the way he articulates it is just so beautiful.
Yeah,
so I really
it's
like
actually
him.
super. That's actually super interesting because if these people weren't born into them that time or that era, and that year, we'll say that the world would be a completely different place than it is right now. And these are certain people that actually changed the world because something else was created. So for them to actually play with to change.
When you look at
incredible.
Bill Gates, he went to a school that had a certain type of computer that like no one else had, and then normally people could only get like 45 minutes or an hour to use it a day. But I can't remember exactly how it went, but basically he had unlimited access. So where other people in other universities were maybe fighting to get 1 hour a week, he was doing like 12 hours a day or 18 hours a day. And that's basically economies of scale. So if you're doing 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, and other people are doing 1 hour a week, think about how much knowledge and how good and how fast you can get at that, So, and that goes for anything in life. Like, I read 117 books last year. Most people won't read 117 books in their entire life. Do you think that might give me a different perspective? Do you think that might give me different points of view from many different people? I go to 100 countries over the last 20 years. A lot of people won't even, make it out of their neighborhood. So
actually, that's a good point what you said there. That some people don't actually leave. That's a good point. That's a good point what you said there, that people don't actually get out of their own neighborhood. I actually met someone like that, and I thought it was actually so funny because I went fruit picking over in Australia, and wasn't far from the city. I was maybe 2 hours outside of Melbourne in a place called Shepparton. Barupna it was called, actually, the town outside of Shepparton. And there was a guy living on the farm. He had a farmhouse on the farm, but he didn't own that farmhouse. He was actually an owner of the fruit farm, and he was actually only rent. He was living in the house, but I'm not sure was he actually paying rent, but he was actually farming for the owner, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
This guy lived there. So we were talking to him one night, and we said, have you gone anywhere else other than Shepparton? Because Shepparton would be the closest town. Well, it's a city, but it's a very small city. And he said, I've only been to Brisbane once, and I only went there for a week just to see my sister or something. But he's never been anywhere else. He's never been to Melbourne, which is 2 hours away. He's never been to Sydney. He's never been to Asia. He's never left the area pretty much where he's living. And this guy was very knowledgeable because of all the expats coming in fruit picking on the farm, which is very interesting. He knew his stuff, but he never left to open up his mind more. And this guy now, I think,
listen, don't get me wrong. If people like this, if they are happy, if they enjoy their lives and they wake up every day and they're smiling and they can look at themselves in the mirror and they have a happy existence, then all power to them. But like my original story, I was never happy in my hometown. For me, happiness came from going out there and exploring, from pushing myself, from pushing my boundaries. That's always what's made me really happy. So I do what makes me happy. And it's not for me to judge anyone else or to comment on anyone else, how they live their life. But I would invite people that if they are unhappy in where they are, that they should try to not fix things, but they should try to expand their knowledge and put themselves in difficult situations and challenging situations, because it's that growth that often propels us and fulfills us, that sense of accomplishment. And that's where I get a lot of my self-confidence. Like, I think you can probably tell I'm a very self-confident person. I am very, I am very opinionated, you know, and I have no problem with that. But this type of self-confidence, it comes from my ability. You could literally plop me down in any country in the world, and I promise you, at the end of the day, I will have made some friends. I will have a hot meal in my stomach. I will have a roof over my head. I'll probably have a couple of beers, and I will be happy. You know, I like,
Yeah.
like I don't need money. I don't need anything else. Like some of the happiest times in my life, I was so completely dirt poor, hitchhiking through, you know, South America or through New Zealand or something like that. And those challenging moments, because I knew I was growing and I was overcoming things, I was just I was just so thrilled to be alive, you know, like it was just such a great adventure.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The experience you had must have been incredible. So, Mikkel, how, like, have you any, like, what am I trying to say? Yeah, how
Did
are
you want to
you?
talk any more books? Because I can talk books all day long.
Yeah, give us your second favorite. So,
Okay, have you read *Sapiens*?
I haven't. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I wouldn't really read too many books, maybe one a month, but
But Dan,
yeah,
you got to read this one. It's called
same.
*Sapiens*, and it is basically a history of humanity, of us as a species, as an
I think
animal.
I'd like that.
And
Yeah.
it is so fascinating. It's so unbelievably brilliant. And one of the things that really struck me in the book, and something I was completely ignorant about, I didn't understand this at all. I thought basically like Neanderthals evolved into Homo erectus, evolved into Homo sapiens, and that's how, and we're Homo sapiens, and this is how it worked. It was like one evolved into the other, evolved into the other.
Mhm.
But actually, this scientist went through and he went through the genealogy, and he can show that most likely there were 7 different types of humans living on planet Earth at one time, 7 different
Mhm.
types of sapiens on Earth within a short period of time, and that we actually most likely massacred and killed all of them. And he tracks that behavior and why we were able to do that, why we were the dominant species. It is so fascinating, and it's all backed on science. Honestly, at first I thought it was like science fiction, but no, it's really based on science.
Sounds very
And
interesting.
it is so interesting. And one of the big things that he talks about is, and it is really applicable today, especially with things like Facebook, um, and all these social networks that are out there. But basically, the reason that we were able to dominate was that these other groups of sapiens could not exist in groups that were larger than, say, 10 to 20 people. And why we are able to do that is because we're able to tell stories. And we're able to tell stories about things that we can't physically see. And we are able to create stories. So we can create a story about God. And we can all follow because we believe in this one abstract concept called God. It's the same with any type of religion, and it's with politics. It's the same with, sorry for banging the mic. It's the same with TV or movies or anything like that. We can create these types of stories, and we can all be bound together based on this one story. So think like, I'm Canadian. We're 35 million people. If Justin Trudeau goes out and, you know, does a march and does a speech, you're going to have tens of thousands of Canadians who are going to line up. And they're all going to feel a sense of belonging because that's the prime minister of the country, and we feel like, or they feel like, he represents them. And no other species on Earth has this ability. And, you know, certainly no other type of sapien is able to have large groups of people. So when you had, say, a Neanderthal who, you know, there was 10 of them, but there was, you know, 150 of us, even though they're taller and they're stronger and they're more muscular, we were able to dominate them because of our sheer numbers and be able to work together based off this belief pattern. So for me, that was just a fascinating, fascinating, fascinating book. So I definitely recommend that one to you.
That's incredible. That's very interesting. You know what you were saying, that we can actually not just only you know, connect with each other and come up with ideas and so on like that, but also imagine the future, and see what's going to happen next, to the way we want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And That's very interesting. So, Mikkel, I'd say our time's nearly up. I'd say we're nearly on an hour. So I'm just going to ask you a few more things before we go.
Yeah.
Is there any place, like, where do you want people to go? Obviously, you want them to go to your podcast, the Expat Money Show.
Yeah.
But if
so you can go ahead.
Yep. No, you.
So yeah, for my podcast, you can download it on Stitcher, on iTunes, basically anywhere that popular podcasts are downloaded, you can find it. So Expat Money Show, put it in the search bar, you'll find us there. But what's also really great is you can go to expatmoneyshow.com. And I even, because like talking books, as you can see, I'm massively into reading. And I'd say it is the #1 question that I get asked from people. So what I did was I actually went through and I listed out the 100 books that I think are most important for entrepreneurs to read. And once again, specifically entrepreneurs who want to do things, location independent, entrepreneurs who are expats, entrepreneurs who are travelers. So if that sounds like you, go to expatmoneyshow.com, and either on the main page, you can scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see a button there, which will be 100 books every expat should read. Or you can go to expatmoneyshow.com / I think the URL is expatmoneyshow.com / 100 books. I think that's what it is.
What we'll do, Mikkel, we'll actually drop the link underneath this video, so people will be able to get to it. So guys, go underneath underneath here, and we'll share the link to you. So
download that, and that will give my best book recommendations out of literally thousands of books that I've read. I spend days narrowing it down, and that's usually my answer. You like to read? Okay, go read this.
Yeah. That's brilliant, Mikkel. That's fantastic. That's a great resource, guys. Go check that out, and I'll post a link underneath this video. So guys, go check out Mikkel's podcast as well over the Expat Money Show on Stitcher and iTunes, and there was one other place.
On the website, you can listen to it or download it directly on the website. But literally any type of podcasting app, it should be there. Yeah, expatmoneyshow.com.
Perfect. Right, guys, it's great having you. Thanks, Mikkel. Thanks for being here.
Thanks very much for having me on. I'll talk to you soon, okay, Dan? Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.